A massive human skeleton emerges from the earth, a secret buried for ages. What if the history you learned is incomplete? For centuries, whispers and even official documents have described the discovery of ancient giant human skeletons. This journey will uncover the global legends, the so-called evidence, the clever hoaxes, and what science actually concludes. You will learn the definitive truth behind one of history's most persistent mysteries. We will explore why these stories began and why they continue to captivate us. Where does myth end and reality begin? What does this fascination reveal about our own search for a more epic past? This concept of an ancient giant race echoes across nearly every corner of the world. Long before any supposed skeletons were unearthed, these colossal beings were already deeply embedded in our oldest stories. In the Hebrew Bible, we hear of the Nephilim, the mighty men of old, the heroes of ancient fame. Greek poets told of the gigantes, monstrous children of the earth who waged war on the gods of Olympus. The cold, harsh landscapes of Norse mythology were inhabited by the Jotunn, elemental giants of frost and stone, constant adversaries to the gods like Thor. And in the rich epics of Hindu tradition, powerful, often demonic beings known as Rakshasas could change their form and towered over ordinary humans. This is not an isolated idea from one culture. It is a near-universal human theme, a shared whisper from our collective past. Why would civilizations with no possible contact with one another, from the deserts of the Middle East to the fjords of Scandinavia, all tell such similar stories about a race of giants? This deep-rooted, worldwide mythology is the fertile ground from which the modern skeleton stories grew. When someone claims to find giant bones, our minds are already prepared to believe it because these figures have lived in our imagination for thousands of years. The legend was already written, it only needed a discovery to bring it to life. The legend finally found its physical form in the autumn of 1869, not in some distant desert but on a farm in Cardiff, New York. Workers digging a well unearthed what appeared to be a 10-foot-tall petrified man. This was the Cardiff Giant, and it caused an absolute sensation. Crowds flocked to see the marvel, paying 50 cents a head for a glimpse of the stony colossus. Newspapers declared it a genuine fossilized giant, a missing link from a forgotten age. Even some scientists of the day were initially fooled, their eyes seeing exactly what the old stories had told them to expect. But the truth was far more cunning. The giant was not a relic of a lost world, but the creation of a man named George Hull, a cigar maker and a staunch atheist. The story goes that Hull, after a heated argument with a fundamentalist preacher about the literal truth of the Bible's giants, decided to create his own. He commissioned a block of gypsum from Iowa, had it secretly carved into the shape of a massive, weathered man, and then buried it on his cousin's farm. He used acids and ink to age it, even hammering darning needles into the block to simulate pores. He then waited a year for the earth to settle over his deception before staging the discovery. The public and even some experts fell for it completely. The giant was a perfect storm of wish fulfillment, a physical object that seemed to confirm our deepest myths. But of course, the hoax could not last. Other scientists, notably paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh, quickly identified it as a modern statue, noting the fresh tool marks and the gypsum itself, which does not fossilize in that way. Hull eventually confessed, but the public's fascination had already proven a powerful point. The Cardiff Giant was a manufactured myth, a testament not to ancient giants, but to our own powerful desire to believe in them. It showed how easily a clever forgery could tap into that universal story we carry, creating a frenzy that reason struggled to contain. This single hoax set a crucial precedent, casting a long shadow of doubt over every giant discovery that would follow. While the Cardiff Giant was a proven fraud, other discoveries seemed to offer a more credible case for ancient giants. One of the most compelling and often repeated stories comes from a dusty cave in Nevada. In 1911, a group of miners began excavating a large deposit of bat guano from a place known as Lovelock Cave. What they pulled from the deep, layered earth was not just fertilizer. They reportedly uncovered strange artifacts and, most intriguingly, human skeletons of unusual size. Some were said to be remarkably tall, wrapped in ancient shrouds. The public imagination, already primed by legend, immediately knew what this meant. They had found the giants. This discovery appeared to be a perfect match for the local Paiute people's oral history, which told of the Sitika, a fearsome tribe of red-haired cannibals who towered over ordinary men. According to the legend, after a long conflict, the Paiute ancestors finally trapped these giants inside Lovelock Cave, starting a great fire at the entrance that sealed their fate. Here at last was a story with both physical evidence and a rich local tradition to back it up. It felt like a myth made real, but when we look closer at the archaeological facts, the story changes. The skeletons found in Lovelock Cave were indeed tall for the time period, with some individuals estimated to be around 6 to 6.5 feet in height. This was certainly above average for the ancient people of the region, but it falls far short of the 8 or 10-foot giants of lore. They were tall, strong people, not a separate race of giants. And what about the famous red hair? Analysis of the actual hair samples showed that their original color was likely a dark brown. The reddish hue was probably a result of chemical processes, the slow staining from the cave's soil, and the prolonged exposure to the guano deposits over centuries. So, what do we have when we separate the evidence from the excitement? We have a population of tall, early inhabitants. We have a powerful and dramatic oral history passed down through generations. And we have the human tendency to connect the two, to see a race of cannibalistic giants where there was a tribe of formidable adversaries. The story of Lovelock Cave is a powerful lesson in how local legend and ambiguous archaeological finds can merge, creating a narrative so compelling that it can feel truer than the facts themselves. While the Cardiff Giant was a physical hoax, an even more pervasive kind of deception was spreading through the printed page. The 19th and early 20th centuries were the golden age of the newspaper hoax, a time when journalism was a brutal circulation war. This was the era of yellow journalism, where sensationalism sold papers and facts were often secondary to a fantastic headline. Editors discovered that nothing captured the public's imagination quite like the discovery of a giant. The New York World might scream, "Giants of other ages," describing a 12-foot skeleton found in a Wisconsin mound. Rival papers like the New York Times were not immune, publishing accounts such as the unearthing of a 9-foot skeleton with massive skull in Ohio. These stories were presented with an air of authority, citing anonymous professors or mysterious archaeological societies, lending them a false credibility. For a penny, a reader could be transported to a world where the myths were real, where diggers' shovels were uncovering the lost chapters of human history. The competition was fierce, and if one paper had a story about a giant, another needed an even bigger one. There was little incentive to verify these tales before publication. The goal was to sell papers, not to advance science. The problem is that today, in our digital age, these very articles have been resurrected. They are scanned, uploaded, and shared across the internet, stripped of their original context. A headline from 1885 is presented as a forgotten historical fact, a piece of suppressed evidence. Readers see the familiar masthead of a reputable newspaper and understandably think it must be true. They do not see the frantic competition of the newsroom, the desperate editor demanding a story to beat the competition, or the fact that these reports were almost universally debunked or quietly forgotten just weeks after they were printed. These old articles are not proof of giants, they are proof of a media landscape where fiction was a profitable business model. They represent a giant epidemic, not of bones, but of ink and paper, a contagion of tall tales that continues to infect our search for the truth centuries later. The same impulse that fueled the newspaper hoaxes was also shaping the interpretation of genuine archaeological wonders. Across the American Midwest and South, early European settlers encountered landscapes dotted with enormous geometric earthworks. Great serpentine mounds coiled across the Ohio valleys, and massive pyramidal structures rose from the flatlands. When these settlers and the archaeologists who followed began to excavate, they found more than just artifacts. They uncovered human remains, and some of these skeletons were, in fact, quite tall compared to the average European of the era. The Adena and Hopewell peoples who built these magnificent complexes often had robust bone structures, with some males reaching over 6 feet in height. But to the settlers' minds, conditioned by their own biblical and classical myths, this was impossible. They could not or would not accept that the Native American peoples they were displacing could be the descendants of such master builders. The evidence before their eyes was reinterpreted through a lens of prejudice and preconceived myth. The mounds, they declared, must have been constructed by a lost race of giants, a superior civilization that had vanished long before. This was not just a fanciful theory, it was a convenient one. If the land's true architects were a mysterious, vanished race of giants, then the contemporary Native Americans were merely later arrivals, squatters with no deeper claim to the territory than the Europeans themselves. This lost race myth became a powerful tool for justifying displacement and colonization, effectively erasing the deep, sophisticated history of indigenous peoples. Modern archaeology, of course, has completely overturned this fiction. Through painstaking analysis of artifacts, burial practices, and genetic links, we now know without a doubt that these monumental earthworks are the work of the direct ancestors of modern Native American tribes. The Adena and Hopewell cultures were not a lost race. They were a foundational part of a continuous indigenous history in North America, spanning thousands of years. The tall skeletons were not giants, they were simply the remains of a healthy, well-nourished, and physically impressive people. The real story here is not one of mythical giants, but of human achievement and the enduring power of cultural bias to shape the stories we tell about the past. This modern mythology of giants found its most powerful voice not in academic journals, but in popular books and across the internet. Authors and researchers like L. Amarzali and Steve Keel became champions for this alternate history, building a compelling case that resonates with millions. Their method often follows a familiar pattern. They begin with a kernel of genuine data, perhaps an old newspaper article or a real archaeological photograph of an unusually large skeleton. But then, they selectively interpret this evidence, removing all context. A photograph of a large but normal human skeleton from a dig is presented without a scale, allowing the viewer's imagination to fill in the dimensions, transforming a 6-foot-tall warrior into a 12-foot-tall giant. They weave these isolated pieces into a grand narrative, one where mainstream archaeologists and museums are not simply cautious scientists, but active participants in a massive global cover-up. The story goes that institutions like the Smithsonian are deliberately hiding or even destroying giant bones to protect the established timeline of human history. Why is this story so incredibly appealing, even when the evidence is so thin? It offers a secret, a thrilling truth known only to a brave few. It transforms the dusty, complex, and often slow-moving field of archaeology into an epic conspiracy, a battle against hidden powers. It promises a past that is far more dramatic and mysterious than the one presented in textbooks. The meticulous, peer-reviewed work of real archaeologists who painstakingly piece together history from pottery shards and soil layers cannot compete with the emotional charge of a hidden truth. This narrative gives people a sense of discovery and rebellion, making them feel like they are uncovering a reality that the authorities do not want them to see. It is a story that feeds on our desire for a world that is more extraordinary and more epic than the one we inhabit. This brings us to the most persistent and dramatic claim of all, the grand conspiracy pointing a finger at one of the world's most respected institutions. The story goes that the Smithsonian institution has been systematically acquiring giant skeletons only to hide or even destroy them, all to protect the conventional narrative of human history. The origin of this explosive accusation is often traced back to a single, mysterious document. Allegedly, in the early 1900s, a Smithsonian archaeologist wrote a letter to a colleague describing the discovery of several giant skeletons, some over 9 feet tall, and stating that the institution's policy was to suppress this information to avoid rewriting history. The problem is, no one has ever produced this letter. No original copy exists in any archive, no carbon copy has been found in any file. It appears only as a transcript on websites and in books, its authenticity impossible to verify. The entire foundation of the cover-up rests on a phantom piece of paper. So what does the Smithsonian actually do with the vast number of human remains in its collection? The truth is far less dramatic and far more respectful. For decades, the institution, like many museums, did hold thousands of Native American skeletons and funerary objects, many gathered during a less ethical era of archaeology. This changed profoundly with the passage of a federal law in 1990, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA. This law did not mandate a cover-up, it mandated the opposite. It required museums to inventory their collections and work proactively to return these remains and sacred objects to the tribes for proper burial. This is a long, meticulous, and solemn process of reconciliation, not destruction. The deaccessioning of remains under NAGPRA is an act of ethical responsibility, a correction of past wrongs. It is a process documented in triplicate, reviewed by committees, and carried out in partnership with tribal nations. To frame this sacred, lawful repatriation as a sinister cover-up is to completely misunderstand and disrespect the spirit and the letter of this important law. The real story here is not one of hidden giants, but of returning ancestors to their descendants, a quiet and dignified process that continues to this day. But the human body is capable of producing genuine giants, not through myth but through medical reality. The truth lies in a tiny gland at the base of your brain, the pituitary. When this gland functions normally, it produces just the right amount of growth hormone, but sometimes, usually because of a benign tumor, it goes haywire. If this overproduction happens before the growth plates in a child's bones have sealed, the result is a condition known as gigantism. The body receives a constant, unending signal to grow, leading to extraordinary height. If the hormonal flood begins in adulthood after the growth plates have fused, the condition is called acromegaly. Here, the person cannot grow taller, but the body's features, the hands, feet, and bones of the face begin to thicken and enlarge in a distinctive and often debilitating way. These are not conditions of health and power. They come with a heavy price. The sheer scale of the body places immense strain on the cardiovascular system, leading to heart problems and drastically shortened lifespans. Chronic joint pain, vision issues, and severe headaches are common. The idea of an entire, thriving race of ancient giants is biologically implausible because these disorders are just that, disorders. They are medical anomalies, not a sustainable blueprint for a species. To understand what a real human giant looks like, we need only look to the modern record. Robert Wadlow, born in Illinois in 1918, remains the tallest person in reliably recorded history. He reached a staggering height of 8 feet 11 inches. Photographs and films of Wadlow show a man whose life was defined by his size, requiring leg braces to walk and facing constant health challenges. He passed away at the age of only 22. His story is not one of mythical invincibility, but a poignant human testament to the real-world consequences of gigantism. He was one individual supported by modern medicine and a caring family, yet his life was still tragically brief. This is the scientific reality behind the towering legends, a story not of lost races but of singular human beings facing extraordinary medical odds. So let's put one of the most famous images under the microscope. You have almost certainly seen the photograph of two archaeologists standing in a trench, dwarfed by the massive rib cage and skull of a skeleton beside them. This picture has been shared millions of times as the ultimate proof, but when we look closer, the illusion shatters. The original image was actually an entry in a Photoshop contest from over a decade ago, designed specifically to create a convincing giant. The artist used digital tools to seamlessly blend a normal human skeleton into the dig site, scaling it up to an impossible size. The telltale signs are there if you know where to look. The lighting on the giant bones does not quite match the natural sunlight in the trench. The resolution and texture of the bone surface is slightly different from the surrounding soil. This was not a discovery, it was a demonstration of digital artistry, a hoax born from a keyboard, not a shovel. Another common trick relies on a classic cinematic technique, forced perspective. Another viral set of photos shows a team of people crouching around an enormous skeleton laid out on the ground. The bones look colossal, but the setup is cleverly staged. The skeleton itself is placed in the foreground, very close to the camera, while the people are positioned several feet behind it. Our brains interpret the scene as a single plane, making the normal-sized bones appear gigantic compared to the distant figures. It is the same trick you use when you take a photo, making it look like you are holding the Leaning Tower of Pisa in your hand. The scale is an illusion, a simple manipulation of depth and perception. And sometimes the so-called giant human skeleton is not even human. Some of the most persistent images show long, straight bones with massive, alien-looking skulls. These are often pictures of prehistoric mammal remains, like a woolly mammoth or a mastodon. A mammoth's pelvis or femur, cleaned and lying by itself, can be easily mistaken for a giant human limb borne by an untrained eye. The huge, domed skull of a dinosaur, stripped of its familiar horns and crests, can be misidentified as the bizarre cranium of a giant. This is not a deliberate hoax, but a simple case of mistaken identity, fueled by a desire to see something extraordinary in the ordinary debris of deep time. Learning these visual cues is like acquiring a new lens for seeing the world. You start to notice the inconsistencies in the lighting, the awkward angles that suggest forced perspective, the anatomical features that just do not look human. The next time you see a photograph that takes your breath away, pause and look critically. Ask yourself where the people are in relation to the object. Look for the shadows, question the source. The truth is often hiding in the details, waiting for a curious mind to find it. Even the most honest archaeological discovery can be twisted into a giant's tale through simple, understandable errors. Imagine a team carefully excavating a burial site, their trowels brushing away centuries of soil to reveal a human skeleton. The bones are not laid out neatly as in a modern coffin. Over time, a burial chamber's roof can collapse, its walls can shift, and the skeleton within can be pressed into a contorted, unnatural position. The spine might be arched dramatically, or the leg bones might be splayed far apart. When an excavator attempts to measure this jumbled array, the natural impulse is to measure from the highest point of the skull to the farthest toe bone. This diagonal measurement, however, does not reflect the person's actual living height. It can easily add several extra inches or even more than a foot to the estimate. A person who was 6 feet tall in life could be recorded as 7 feet in death, all because of the chaotic geometry of a collapsed grave. This kind of mismeasurement is a classic pitfall in the field, one that requires experienced osteologists to correctly reassemble the puzzle and calculate true stature. The decomposition process itself can further distort the evidence. As soft tissues decay, the skeleton loses the ligaments that hold it together. The bones can shift, slide, and scatter. A heavy object settling on the grave might push the skull several inches away from the neck vertebrae. In one well-documented case from a mound site in the Ohio River Valley, a skeleton was uncovered with its bones significantly dispersed. The initial on-site measurement suggested an individual of extraordinary size, but when the bones were carefully reassembled in a laboratory and analyzed using modern anatomical formulas, the estimated living height was a far more modest 6 feet 2 inches. This was a tall, robust individual, to be sure, but not a giant. The scatter of the bones had created an optical illusion of immense scale, an illusion that was only broken by patient scientific reconstruction. These are not acts of deception, but the natural challenges of interpreting a fragile, fragmented record. Our desire for a more dramatic past can then take these already exaggerated measurements and stretch them even further, transforming a tall ancestor into a mythical colossus. The desire to find proof in ancient texts is perhaps the most powerful driver of the giant phenomenon. For many, the most compelling evidence is not found in a dusty cave, but on the printed pages of the Bible itself. The book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 4, contains a line that has echoed for millennia. It reads, "There were giants in the earth in those days." This single poetic statement has been used for centuries as a definitive historical claim. But when we look at the original language, the picture becomes far less clear. The Hebrew word translated as giants in many English versions is Nephilim. This word does not inherently mean giants of great stature. Its root is more commonly understood to mean fallen ones, and many biblical scholars argue it refers to tyrants or mighty warriors who had fallen from grace, not necessarily to people of immense physical size. They were morally fallen, not literally towering. The verse is part of a complex, symbolic narrative about the corruption of the world before the Great Flood, a theological explanation for why divine judgment was necessary. To extract a single phrase and treat it as a literal fossil record is to remove it from its entire literary and spiritual context. This interpretive leap is amplified when we turn to another text, the Book of Enoch. This is an ancient Jewish work rich with apocalyptic visions that delves much deeper into the story of the Nephilim. Enoch describes the Watchers, a group of angels who descended to earth, took human wives, and fathered a hybrid race of giants who ravaged the planet. It is a gripping, dramatic story that fills in the tantalizing gaps left by Genesis. There is just one crucial historical fact. The Book of Enoch, while ancient and influential, is not part of the standard Hebrew Bible. It is considered apocryphal, meaning it is outside the accepted canon of Scripture for most Jewish and Christian traditions. It was a popular and important text in certain communities 2,000 years ago, but it was never intended to be a scientific or historical document. It is a work of theology and myth, using powerful imagery to explore themes of sin, divine order, and rebellion. Using the Book of Enoch to prove the existence of physical giants is like using Homer's Odyssey to prove the existence of the one-eyed Cyclops. Both are masterpieces of ancient literature that use larger-than-life characters to convey profound truths about the human condition, but they were not written as eyewitness accounts. The real power of these texts lies not in their biological accuracy, but in their enduring ability to explain the presence of evil and the memory of a lost epic age. They answer a deep human need for a time when the world was more vast and the stakes were unimaginably high. When we mistake this profound symbolism for literal history, we may miss the deeper meaning altogether. This financial engine of belief runs on our deepest curiosities. Behind every viral photograph and best-selling book, there is a marketplace capitalizing on our desire for a more mysterious world. Authors can earn substantial advances for manuscripts that promise to reveal suppressed histories of giants. Their books prominently featured in the alternative history sections of major retailers. Television networks and streaming platforms commission documentaries that present the giant theory as a compelling whodunit, complete with dramatic reenactments and ominous music, generating advertising revenue and subscriber fees from captivated audiences. The most prominent proponents become headliners on the paid speaking circuit, drawing crowds to conferences where tickets can cost dozens, even hundreds of dollars. For many attendees, this is not just entertainment, it is access to a hidden truth, a community of fellow seekers, and the thrill of feeling that they are on the inside of a great secret. This entire ecosystem creates a powerful financial incentive to keep the narrative alive. A debunked photograph is not a failure, it is merely a plot twist, a new piece of evidence for the cover-up that can be discussed in the next book or documentary special. The business model does not rely on proving the myth true, but on perpetuating the compelling question of its possibility. The mystery itself is the product. This commercial drive extends beyond media and into physical spaces. The small town of Lovelock, Nevada, for instance, has embraced its legendary connection to the CT car. Visitors can stop at the local museum to see the artifacts and hear the tale, and the cave itself is a destination for curious tourists. A hotel in the area might feature the giant in its branding, and a restaurant could name a burger after the mythical cannibals. The local economy benefits from the legend, creating a tangible community-level stake in the story's survival. This is not necessarily deceptive. It is simply human nature to build identity and commerce around a unique local history, even one blurred by myth. The same phenomenon transformed the Cardiff Giant from a confessed hoax into a permanent tourist attraction, with its original now displayed in a museum. The giant was a financial success from its very first day, and it remains one over a century later. When a story, regardless of its factual basis, becomes intertwined with livelihoods and revenue streams, it develops a remarkable resilience. The truth becomes secondary to the value of the tale itself, a value measured not in evidence but in engagement, community pride, and cold, hard cash. The myth is profitable, and that may be the most powerful reason it continues to stand tall against all scientific opposition. Ireland's ancient texts speak of the Fomorians, a monstrous race of giants who were misshapen and violent, often depicted with a single arm and a single leg. They represented the chaotic and destructive forces of nature, the harsh sea, and the barren land that early settlers had to conquer. Far to the south, the journals of Ferdinand Magellan's crew told of encountering giants on the Patagonian coast. They described men so tall that the Europeans' heads barely reached their waists, a tale that would label the region itself Tierra de los Patagons, the land of the big feet. And in the lush, tropical Philippines, folklore warns of the Kappa, a giant, tree-dwelling trickster who smokes a large cigar, his glowing ember seen flickering in the dark canopy. He is not a historical figure but a spirit of the forest, an explanation for strange night sounds and lost travelers. These stories, from the misty coasts of Europe to the vastness of the New World and the islands of the Pacific, share a common thread. They are not fossil records but human records. They use the image of the giant to give form to the things our ancestors could not otherwise explain. The Fomorians gave a face to the terror of a storm-lashed coast. The Patagonian giant gave scale to the awe and fear of encountering a completely unfamiliar people. The Kappa gave a reason for the unsettling feeling of being watched in a deep, dark wood. They are powerful, symbolic narratives born from the collision of human imagination with the vast, mysterious, and often intimidating world. They tell us less about the people who might have walked the earth and more about the minds of the people who told the stories. The laws of physics present an insurmountable barrier to the existence of a 12-foot human. To understand why, we need to look at a simple but powerful principle of biomechanics known as the square-cube law. Imagine a person who is 6 feet tall. Now picture doubling their height to create a 12-foot giant. This is not a simple matter of scaling everything up equally. When you double the height, the giant is not just twice as big. Its volume and therefore its weight increases by a factor of 8. That giant would be 8 times heavier than the 6-foot person, but here is the critical problem. The strength of a bone is determined by its cross-sectional area, the thickness you would see if you sliced it in half. When you double the height, the thickness of those bones only increases by a factor of 4. So you have a creature that is 8 times heavier, trying to stand on leg bones that are only 4 times stronger. It is a catastrophic mismatch. The skeleton would be hopelessly inadequate for the load. A 12-foot human would not be a powerful titan. It would be a prisoner in its own body, likely unable to stand or walk without its bones fracturing under the immense strain. Think of it like building a skyscraper. You cannot simply take a model of a 10-story building and scale it up to 100 stories using the same thin supports. The scaled-up weight would instantly collapse the structure. The same physical laws apply to living bodies. This biomechanical reality makes the evolution of a stable, thriving species of human giants a virtual impossibility. Their own weight would be their greatest adversary, a biological dead end written into the very geometry of life itself. The case of the Castile, now giant, demonstrates how even a scientist's preliminary hypothesis can ignite a myth. In 1890, French anthropologist Georges Vacher de Lapouge was excavating a Bronze Age burial site near the village of Castelnau-le-Lez. Among the fragmented remains, he uncovered pieces of a human skeleton that were notably large and robust, a humerus, a tibia, and part of a femur. Based on the size of these individual fossilized fragments, Lapouge ventured a staggering estimate. He calculated that the individual in life would have stood over 11 feet tall. This was not a claim of a complete, articulated skeleton lying in the earth, but an extrapolation from broken pieces, a theoretical reconstruction. The announcement sent a ripple through the scientific community and the public alike. Here was a credentialed scholar, a man of science, seemingly confirming the ancient legends with hard evidence. But the crucial detail often lost in the retelling is that this was a single, speculative claim that was never substantiated. No other anthropologists independently verified his calculations. The bones themselves, while large, were from a type of robust early human, possibly from a population known for their stature. Lapouge's method of estimation was controversial even at the time, and without a complete skeleton to measure, his 11-foot figure remained just that, a figure, an educated guess that was never backed by peer-reviewed study or further discovery. Yet, once the number was spoken and printed, it took on a life of its own. The nuance vanished, the fragmented fossils became a complete giant in the public mind, and the speculative estimate hardened into established fact within the world of alternative history. The Castile, now giant, became a permanent fixture in the lore, a scientific ghost that continues to haunt us, not because the evidence was strong, but because the story was simply too compelling to forget. A single click can now launch a century-old myth across the globe. The internet did not create the story of ancient giants, but it built a superhighway for its propagation, where a debunked newspaper article from 1890 can be scanned, uploaded, and shared with millions before the sun sets. This digital ecosystem thrives on a powerful currency: engagement. Clickbait websites have mastered the art of the irresistible headline, promising photographic proof that scientists do not want you to see. These sites are not funded by truth, but by advertising revenue that flows with every click, creating a direct incentive to prioritize shock over substance. The more sensational the claim, the more likely it is to be shared, and the more revenue it generates. There is no penalty for being wrong, only for being boring. This content is then fed into the engines of social media, where complex algorithms are designed with one primary goal: to keep you scrolling. These systems are not arbiters of fact, they are predictors of attention. They notice that you paused on a post about giant skeletons, and in response, they fill your feed with more of the same, connecting you with pages, groups, and creators who all reinforce that single captivating idea. You are gradually ushered into a digital echo chamber, a room where everyone seems to be agreeing with each other, and dissenting voices from scientific institutions or skeptical fact-checkers are quietly filtered out, deemed irrelevant to your new interest. Inside this chamber, belief solidifies not through evidence but through consensus and endless repetition. A digitally altered photograph from a Photoshop contest a decade ago is presented as fresh evidence stripped of its origin story. The speculative estimate of the Cardiff, now giant, is treated as established fact. Every piece of the puzzle, no matter how shaky its foundation, clicks perfectly into place, building a world that feels more real than the messy, complicated one outside. This is how a local hoax from the age of penny papers becomes a global phenomenon in the age of fiber optics, proving that a story does not need to be true to live forever. It just needs a network that rewards the telling. Real human history is far more fascinating than any myth. While our imaginations leap to 12-foot titans, the actual fossil record reveals a dramatic story of adaptation and survival, written in the bones of our ancient relatives. Take Homo heidelbergensis, a species that thrived across Europe and Africa between 700,000 and 200,000 years ago. These were not giants, but they were powerful. Their skeletons show they were robust and heavily muscled, built for endurance hunting in a harsh, unforgiving world. Some males stood around 6 feet tall, a truly imposing stature for an era where the average height was significantly less. They were the kind of individuals who would have commanded respect, their physical presence a testament to a life of immense physical challenge. Their likely descendants, the Neanderthals, followed a similar blueprint. They were stocky, with strong, thick bones adapted to conserve heat in the cold climates of Ice Age Europe. A 6-foot-tall Neanderthal would have been an incredibly strong and formidable person, but again, this is a far cry from the beings of legend. These were real, breathing humans, their stature a direct response to the environmental pressures they faced. Then, the story takes a completely different turn on a remote Indonesian island called Flores. Here, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an entirely different kind of human, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit. These people stood only about 3.5 feet tall. Their small size was likely an evolutionary adaptation to the limited resources on their island home. This is the true diversity of our family tree. We see a range of sizes and body types, all shaped by natural selection to fit specific niches. We see the robust, tall frames of heidelbergensis and Neanderthals, and we see the remarkably small stature of the hobbits. What we do not see anywhere in the millions of fossils catalogued by science is evidence of a stable, thriving population of 8 or 10-foot humans. The real story is not one of lost giants, but of the incredible plasticity of the human form, a tapestry woven with threads of adaptation, not fantasy. This relentless search for giants leaves a trail of real and lasting damage in its wake. When enthusiasts convinced that a lost race built the ancient mounds of North America trespass onto sacred indigenous lands to dig for proof, they are not just hunting for bones. They are desecrating graves. They are shoveling through the burial sites of ancestors, scattering remains that were laid to rest with ceremony and respect. For modern Native American communities, these are not anonymous artifacts. They are grandmothers, grandfathers, and warriors, their spiritual journey disrupted by a quest for a fictional past. This is more than just trespassing. It is a profound cultural violation, a denial of a people's own history and their deep, continuous connection to the land. By insisting that their ancestors could not have been the architects of such wonders, these myths actively erase indigenous achievement, replacing a rich, verifiable heritage with a disrespectful fantasy. The consequences extend beyond spiritual harm. This erosion of respect has a direct physical impact on our shared human story. When the public becomes convinced that mainstream archaeologists are part of a cover-up, trust in scientific institutions crumbles. Why fund a museum that is hiding the truth? Why listen to an expert who is lying to you? This skepticism creates an environment where legitimate research is viewed with suspicion, while unproven theories are embraced as rebellious truth. Worse, it fuels a black market. Looters, motivated by the hope of finding a giant skeleton to sell to a private collector, will ravage an unprotected site in a single night. They are not carefully brushing away soil layer by layer. They are tearing through history with shovels, destroying the context that gives artifacts their meaning. A pottery shard is just a piece of broken clay until you know which layer of earth it came from, what it was buried with, and how it relates to the foundation of a nearby dwelling. That context is the story, and once it is lost, it can never be recovered. Every time a looter's hole is dug in search of a giant, a page from the book of human history is ripped out and destroyed forever, all to prove a story that was never true to begin with. The desire to reshape history is a powerful and recurring human impulse, and the Cardiff Giant was far from an isolated incident. Decades later, in England, another audacious forgery took root, one that would fool the scientific establishment for over 40 years. The Piltdown Man was presented as the ultimate missing link, a skull with a human-like brain case and an ape-like jaw, supposedly discovered in a gravel pit. It was a discovery that perfectly fit the prevailing and prejudiced expectation of the time that human intelligence had developed first in Europe. The hoax was meticulously crafted, with the bones chemically stained to look ancient and the teeth deliberately filed down to suggest a unique evolutionary path. It was a fraud driven not by a single person's vendetta, but by a potent cocktail of nationalistic pride and the desperate race to find the origin of humanity. The forger, whose identity is still debated, gave the world exactly what it wanted to see, and the experts, wanting to believe, saw it. It took the advancement of new dating techniques in the 1950s to finally expose the truth, revealing the skull as a medieval human and the jaw as a modern orangutan. The Piltdown Man stands as a stark warning of how confirmation bias can blind even the brightest minds, a cautionary tale of science being seduced by a story that felt right. A similar drive for glory, but on a much faster timescale, unfolded in Japan at the turn of the millennium. Shinichi Fujimura, an amateur archaeologist hailed as the Stone Age master, was making breathtaking discoveries that seemed to push Japan's history back tens of thousands of years. He kept finding ancient stone tools in geological layers so old they challenged the established understanding of human migration. His secret, however, was not genius but deception. In 2000, newspaper reporters hidden overnight captured photos of Fujimura digging holes and deliberately planting his own artifacts before excavating them the next day as a new find. His motivation appeared to be pure fame, the intoxicating allure of being the man who single-handedly rewrote his country's prehistoric narrative. What connects these disparate hoaxes, from a petrified giant in New York to a planted tool in Japan, are the universal drivers behind the deception. For some, like George Hull, it was ideological warfare, a practical joke aimed at mocking religious belief. For the creator of Piltdown, it was likely nationalism, a desire to place his country at the center of the human story. For Fujimura, it was the pursuit of personal acclaim and a place in the history books. And for the newspapers of the 19th century, it was simply money, the cold, hard cash generated by a sensational front-page story. These forgers all understood a fundamental truth, that we see what we want to see. They did not need to create perfect fakes. They only needed to create fakes that perfectly matched our deepest desires, whether for a biblical giant, a European ancestor, or an ancient national hero. In this long, shadowy history of archaeological deception, the tales of giant skeletons are just one chapter, a persistent echo of our timeless yearning for a past that is as grand and mysterious as our imagination. This deep-seated longing for a more epic past is not just about bones, it is about our own place in the universe. The appeal of lost giants taps into the same psychological wellspring as theories like the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Both narratives offer a sweeping, simplified answer to the complex, often intimidating question of human origins. The real story of our past, pieced together from countless pottery shards, scattered fossils, and genetic data, is messy, gradual, and demands patience to understand. The idea of a race of giants or of visitors from the stars replaces that slow, complicated crawl with a single, spectacular event. It is a story not of adaptation, but of cataclysm, a grand conflict that reshaped the world. This provides a strangely comforting framework. If the Earth was once ruled by mighty titans whom our ancestors overthrew, then our own existence becomes the triumphant climax of that story. We are not just another species that happened to evolve. We are the victorious underdogs who conquered the gods of old. This narrative positions modern humanity as the pinnacle, the inheritors of a world won through legendary struggle. It transforms history from a random sequence of events into a purposeful saga with a clear hero, us. The giant becomes the ultimate antagonist, a foil against which human courage and ingenuity can shine all the brighter. This desire for a simplified, heroic past is a powerful antidote to the ambiguities of the present, offering a world where the lines between good and evil, strong and weak, are drawn in the unmistakable silhouette of a colossal skeleton. The tools of truth are far more meticulous than a shovel and a guess. Inside a modern forensic anthropology lab, the air is cool and still, a world away from the chaos of an excavation site. Here, a skeleton is not a spectacle, it is a puzzle to be solved with patience and precision. The process begins long before any measurement is taken. When remains are discovered in the field, archaeologists do not simply pull them from the earth. They work with dental picks and soft brushes, exposing each bone in its exact position. They photograph and map the entire scene, documenting the relationship of every fragment to the others. This context is everything, a snapshot of the individual's final resting place that can reveal clues about their life and death. Once carefully removed and transported, the bones undergo a gentle cleaning to remove centuries of soil, not with harsh chemicals but with careful manual labor. Only then does the true work of reconstruction begin. An osteologist, a scientist specialized in bones, starts the painstaking task of reassembling the skeleton. This is a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle where the pieces are fragile and not all may be present. The goal is to lay out the bones in their correct anatomical position, recreating the structure of the living person. This step alone shatters many giant myths. A skeleton that was contorted in the ground, its bones scattered by time, can now be seen for what it truly is. The spine is realigned, the legs are positioned naturally, and the exaggerated diagonal measurements taken in the field are replaced by an accurate assessment of the frame. Determining height is not a matter of stretching a tape measure from the top of the skull to the heel. Living stature is calculated using established mathematical formulas derived from studying thousands of known individuals. Forensic anthropologists take precise measurements of specific long bones, most commonly the femur or thigh bone. They use equations like the well-respected Trotter and Glesser method, which correlate the length of these bones to a person's total height. A scientist will measure the femur to the nearest millimeter, then plug that number into a formula that is also specific to the individual's sex and ancestral background. This science is so refined that it can estimate a person's living height within a range of just an inch or two. There is no room in this process for a careless error of 3 or 4 feet. The idea that a professional could mistake a 6-foot skeleton for a 9-foot giant is not just unlikely. It is a mathematical impossibility given their rigorous methods. This is how we know with scientific certainty the true stature of our ancestors. The measuring tape does not lie, but our eyes, filled with the shadows of old stories, certainly can. Another common argument points to oversized objects as proof of giants. If giant tools exist, then the people who wielded them must have been giants themselves, right? This line of reasoning often points to discoveries of massive stone axes or hammers, objects so heavy that an average person could barely lift them, let alone use them effectively for work or warfare. The logic seems sound on its surface, but it crumbles under the weight of practical reality. Many of these enormous tools were not designed for a single individual. They were community tools. Think of a massive stone maul used for driving posts or breaking apart large rocks. This was not a weapon for one warrior, but a shared resource, perhaps operated by several people together or used in a stationary setup, lifted and dropped with the help of ropes and levers. Its size was a reflection of the task, not the user. The same principle applies to some of the most awe-inspiring ancient structures. We look at the colossal stone blocks of Baalbek in Lebanon or the massive foundations at Sacsayhuaman in Peru, and our modern minds immediately leap to a simple solution: giant strength. How else could multi-ton stones be quarried, shaped, and lifted into place with such precision? The answer, however, is not superhuman power, but superhuman ingenuity. Ancient engineers were masters of physics long before the equations were written down. They understood leverage, they used rollers and sledges, they carved intricate fitting joints that distributed weight perfectly, and they employed vast workforces coordinated with painstaking skill. The construction of a pyramid was not a feat of giant muscle. It was a monumental achievement of logistics, mathematics, and communal effort. Sometimes the so-called giant artifact is not an artifact at all. A large, unusually shaped stone found near an ancient site might be mistaken for a giant's tool when it is simply a product of natural erosion, a geofact that happens to look man-made. Our pattern-seeking brains are quick to see intention in random shapes, especially when we are hoping to find evidence for a beloved myth. The presence of a large object does not demand a large individual any more than the existence of a skyscraper demands a 50-foot-tall construction worker. It is a testament to collective human intelligence and perseverance, qualities far more incredible and well-documented than the existence of a mythical race of giants. These towering figures have long since escaped the dusty pages of old newspapers and archaeological reports to claim a permanent home in our collective imagination. Our modern myths are now projected onto the silver screen and rendered in digital worlds where giants are more vivid and powerful than ever. The simple, enduring fable of Jack and the Beanstalk established a classic blueprint, a tale of a clever underdog using his wits to conquer a stupid, hungry giant and claim his treasure. This story has been retold for generations, cementing the giant as a symbol of a challenge that can be overcome. But contemporary narratives have evolved this archetype into something far more complex and haunting. In the sprawling fantasy epic Game of Thrones, the giants north of the Wall are not mere monsters. They are a dying race, tragic and noble, capable of deep loyalty and ferocious in battle. Their portrayal adds a layer of melancholy, suggesting a lost world of wonder we can never reclaim. This stands in stark contrast to the sheer existential terror of Attack on Titan, where giants are mindless, unstoppable engines of destruction that have pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Here, the giant is not a relic to be excavated, but an active, apocalyptic threat. These fictional representations do more than just entertain us. They constantly refresh and reshape the archetype, keeping the concept pulsating in the public mind. When a viewer immersed in these stories later stumbles upon an online article about a supposed giant skeleton, their mind is already primed for belief. The line between a compelling fantasy and a plausible historical fact becomes dangerously blurred. The emotional resonance of a noble giant from a favorite television show can lend an unearned credibility to a shaky, real-world claim. The giant is no longer just a character, it is a feeling, a sense of epic scale that we are conditioned to accept. This cultural saturation creates a powerful feedback loop. The ancient legends inspired the fictions, and now those fictions breathe new life into the legends, ensuring that this particular mystery, despite all evidence to the contrary, will never truly die. Yet after sifting through all the evidence, from the gypsum giant to the digitally altered photographs, a definitive truth emerges. These persistent tales are a powerful cocktail, a blend of ancient mythology, deliberate hoaxes, honest misinterpretation, and relentless sensationalism. They are a testament to the power of story, not the reality of history. No credible scientific evidence, no peer-reviewed study, and no verified discovery has ever substantiated the existence of an ancient race of giants. The real giants were tall, robust individuals or people suffering from medical conditions like gigantism, their lives marked by challenge, not mythical glory. This entire journey underscores a vital skill for our modern world, the practice of critical thinking. It is not about cynicism, but about curiosity tempered with careful scrutiny. The next time you encounter a breathtaking claim, pause and ask a few simple questions. Who is presenting this information, and what might they have to gain? What is the original source of this photograph or document? Does the claim align with the fundamental laws of biology and physics we know govern our world? Evaluating our sources is not just an academic exercise, it is a shield against deception. The human story, as revealed by archaeology and science, is a rich tapestry of migration, innovation, survival, and art. It is filled with genuine enigmas, from the purpose of Stonehenge to the collapse of great civilizations. These are the real mysteries waiting to be unraveled through careful study, not wishful thinking. The authentic narrative of our past, with all its proven wonders and unanswered questions, is profoundly fascinating enough without needing to invent giants. We would love to hear what you think. What other historical mysteries capture your imagination and deserve a closer, critical look? Share your thoughts in the comments below.